my.
What is up, YouTube? This is Nanashi with a brand new deck profile video. This time I'll be showing off the updates to my Darkness deck, which is still at 60 cards despite one major card being put to 1 on the ban list recently. However, I've made some small adjustments to the build and how it operates, and I'd like to think that even though it's still at 60, it still runs just as powerfully if that grass hadn't been hit at all. So let's see where this goes. Now, given that the majority of the monsters in this deck are level 4, I'm going to start with the ones that aren't level 4. Starting off with the Triple Battle Fader. During the battle phase, if you take a direct attack, you special summon it from your hand, and if you do, the battle phase is over. Also, Triple Shaddoll Falco. If it's sent to the grave by card effect, you get to special summon it from your graveyard face down, and if it's flipped, then you get to special summon another Shaddoll monster from your graveyard to the field face down. But it cannot be another Falco, and you can only use one of these two effects per turn. Triple Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak. You can change it from attack to defense mode to boost a dark monster's attack by 800, or if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to add a Phantom Knights card from your deck to your hand. Phantom Knights of Silent Boots. If you control a Phantom Knights monster, you can special summon this from your hand, or you can banish it from the graveyard to add a Phantom Knights spell trap from your deck to your hand. Bumping past the level 4s, we go to the level 5 Shaddoll Beast. If it goes to graveyard by card effect, then you get to draw a card, and if it's flipped, you get to draw 2 and discard 1. And finally, we have the Dark Creator. You can special summon it from your hand if you have 5 or more dark monsters in your graveyard, and you have no monsters on your field. That makes it a little slow to use, but I still like it. Because once per turn, you can banish a dark monster out of your graveyard to special summon any other dark monster out of your graveyard. Next, we move into the extremely diverse variety of level 4 monsters. Starting off with the Armageddon Knight at 3. When it's summoned, doesn't matter how, you send a dark monster from the deck to the graveyard. This card kicks off so many effects I can't even list it. Similar to Dark Greffer, except that you have to discard a card from your hand in order to use its drop effect. But at the same time, you could drop a level 5 or higher dark monster from your hand to the graveyard to special summon it from your hand, which unfortunately makes it even more of a minus, but at the same time, it does help dump those dark monsters that you know you're not going to be able to use. Doomsday Horror is now at 2. It gains 300 attack for every banished dark monster, and if it's destroyed and sent to the grave, all banished dark monsters go right back to the graveyard, which does in fact kick off all of those neat little Shaddoll effects. Of course, you only get one of them each, but that's fine. Triple Kage to Kage, purely an accelerant to get my rank 4 plays, although sometimes I do use it for fusion material if I just don't have a reason to exceed anymore. But the Prometheus King of the Shadows finally went to 2, and I am happy about this because when it's normal summoned, you get to take all or as many dark monsters out of your graveyard, banish them, and he gains 400 attack per monster banished until the end phase, which means he's more than likely going to be the card to do the finishing blow. Double Shaddoll Dragon, I use this in place of MST as well as one other card, because if it goes to the graveyard by card effect, you get to pop a spell trap. But if it's flipped, you can target a card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. Summoner Monk, while not getting a tremendous amount of play, is at 2 purely because I can't run it at 3 for obvious reasons. Dropping a spell card from your hand to the graveyard to special summon a level 4 monster makes this card an instant Xyz play, or if Witch of Black Rose was special summonable, I could easily use it for a level 8 Synchro. But once you normal summon it, you get to take the top card of your deck and reveal it. If it's a monster, you get to keep both her and the card that you added. If it's not, then both of them have to go to the graveyard. Next, we move into the widely varied spell cards. Triple Allure of Darkness, because no dark deck should ever be complete without as many copies of this as possible, in my opinion. You draw 2 cards and then banish a dark monster out of your hand. Creeping Darkness lets you banish 2 dark monsters out of your graveyard to add a level 4 dark monster from your deck to your hand. Galaxy Cyclone, which pops a set spell trap on the field, or you can banish it from your graveyard, except the turn that it went to the graveyard, to destroy a face-up spell trap. Reinforcement of the Army to add a warrior from deck to hand, because Phantom Knights, Armageddon Knight, and Dark Greffer all qualify. Shaddoll Fusion, which is an alternative way that I now use to dump a lot of my dark monsters. Dumping a Shaddoll and a Phantom Knight to the graveyard to summon a special summon limiter makes it so that I stand a fair chance against my opponents in the event that I have the opportunity to play it. But that grass looked screener going to 1 really upset me because I needed that card at 3 for this deck to function at its full possibilities. Because dumping upwards of 20 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard means that this deck can just fly off the handle at any given moment's notice. But at the same time, 1 is still playable, especially since there's another card that has a similar effect, although not as good. 2 of the beginning of the end, and usually when this card is actually able to be played, it means that I'm ready to finish the duel, so its name is oddly appropriate in my deck. Banishing 5 dark monsters out of your graveyard to draw 3 cards when you have 7 or more in your graveyard means that this is the perfect utility for a deck with this high of a card count. And still running only a single copy of Phantom Knight's Rank Up Magic Launch, it ranks up a Dark Xyz by 1 that doesn't have any Xyz materials and makes itself into an Xyz material to do so. And if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to add a Phantom Knight's monster in your hand to an Xyz monster you control as an Xyz material. And then finishing up, we have the oddly small trap lineup. Single Bottomless, staple in all my decks. Triple Phantom Knight's Fogblade, which is a complete replacement for the Fiendish Chains that I used to use, because it basically does the same thing. Targets an effect monster, negates its effects, makes it so it can't attack, but it also makes it so that the opponent cannot attack it. And it has the effect of, while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to special summon a Phantom Knight's monster from your graveyard. Now, Phantom Knight's Sword has the same second effect, banishing it to special summon a Phantom Knight's monster out of your graveyard, but its other effect allows you to add 800 attack points. I went back and forth between it and the other Phantom Knight's continuous trap, but I kind of like this one more, purely because the attack point boost comes in handy far more often than the other one does. Now, the Triple Power Wall is the replacement card that I was considering using for the missing copies of that grass, and of course, it's nowhere near as powerful. If you're about to take battle damage, you can drop cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard and then reduce that damage by 500 points per card you drop until you hit 0. This card has been known to save my life in many games, so I've started considering using it in other decks as well. And the single Solemn Warning, which is a staple in pretty much everyone's deck. Next we move into the side deck, which doesn't see a tremendous number of changes either. The third Dark Grepher is here, as well as the third Shaddoll Dragon, the single copy of Phantom Knights of Clovenhelm. Now, if it's face up on the field, you get to give it 500 attack points when a Phantom Knights card goes to the graveyard, but you only get that effect once per turn, so realistically it's not even that good. But if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it, and during the end phase you get to return a Phantom Knights card from your graveyard back to your hand. Realistically, that's the only reason I keep it in the side at all anymore, because I want to make sure that on the off chance that I need to, I can continuously reuse my Phantom Knights Fiendish Chains. I'm just going to call it what it is. Phantom Knights Fiendish Chains. Also running the second copy of Witch of the Black Rose, and I went ahead and moved the Crimson Knight Vampire Bram and moved another card into its place, because this card only being able to be summoned off of the spell card bugged me more than I thought it would. So I tried to make sure that the card that I replaced it with could be summoned. But it does have the ability to steal an opponent's monster out of the graveyard, and it can resummon itself if it dies, so it's not a terrible card, just I wanted to make sure that I could summon something a little bit easier than it. Single Brain Control, double MST in the event that I need more Spell Trap Destruction, more than 4 cards can offer. Second copy of Phantom Knight's Rank Up Magic Launch, double Dark Light. A couple of people have actually asked me about this card in private. I use this card in replacement of Mirror Force because this card destroys all special summon monsters that were special summoned this turn by attributing a dark monster with 1500 or more attack points. Realistically, that means that it's not the same as Mirror Force, but I'd like to think it's a fair substitute for the sake of the Dark-type. And yes, I did just say Dark-type. Someone threw that at me and it's stuck in my head ever since. Double Memory Loss is still here though, as well as a second copy of Phantom Knight's Sword and Torrential Tribute. And then we finish up with the extra deck, which is virtually the same as before with a couple of small changes. Still running the triple El Shaddoll Winda. Being able to lock both players into a single special summon at a time does in fact hurt, but she's indestructible by card effects, and if she goes to the graveyard, I essentially get back my Shaddoll Fusion spell. Allied Justice Catastor, though, is fun to use because he destroys anything that he battles that's not a dark monster, so he can destroy about 75% of his opposition. Also still running Celestial Wolflord Blue Sirius because, surprisingly enough, I go into 6-star Synchros more than anything else in this deck. Dark Strike Fighter is just in here because I occasionally get level 7 Synchros, but he has been known to basically do the Galgaga Cowboy move where I do enough effect damage to win a game in the very end. Although I consider that a bit of a scummy move, so I try to do that as little as possible unless my opponent just basically irritates me. Also running the Beals of Diabolic Dragons, indestructible bad battle and card effects, and if I take damage or battle damage is dealt to me through attacks involving him, then he gains attack points equal to that damage I took. Now Dark End Dragon is still a fun tech because he can just send monsters to the graveyard by reducing his attack and defense by 500, so he gets 4 shots. And given that I do have one way to reborn him, then I consider him perfectly useful. Now the Phantom Knights of Breaksword, you can detach a material from him to target a card you control and a card your opponent controls and destroy both. More often than not, you're going to destroy him though, because his effect allows you to summon back 2 Phantom Knights monsters with the same level from your graveyard, which will most often be level 3s, and bump them up a level to make them level 4s if you choose those before mentioned level 3s. But you can only go into dark monsters the turn you do this, which is not a problem. Now I'm still running Chiron Gorgon, but I'm starting to have doubts as to his usefulness in the current format because, sure, he can redirect targeting effects, but he can only do them on single targets, and I used to use him all the time on MST, but Twin Twisters has started becoming more of a problem. Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, though, is always useful. Double detaching to take half the attack of an opponent's monster and add it to him means that he is always going to be 2,500 points stronger than his target, and that's significant damage. Evil Swarm Nightmare is somewhat useful, but not as much as I was hoping. When your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, including Pendulum Summoning, you get to detach a material and flip them all face down. And that does hurt, but with only 1950 defense, he's not exactly hard to kill. Now, Evil Swarm Ouroboros, I am loving more and more in this deck that I use him. He requires 3 level 4s, but that doesn't mean he's difficult to summon. I've been able to do that more often than I thought. You can attach a material to either discard a card from your opponent's hand, return a card your opponent controls to the field, from the field to their hand, or banish a card out of your opponent's graveyard, but you can only use one of each of these effects while it's face up on the field. I also am still running King of the Feral Imps, purely because I want to make sure I get Kage to Kage in my hand as quickly as possible, provided I had the ability to do other Xyz plays. And the major change that I made to this extra deck, if you couldn't tell, was actually Dark Requiem Xyz Dragon. I know I said earlier that he's easier to that I wanted something in this extra deck that's easier to summon than Bram, and technically speaking he is. He requires 3 level 5s, whereas Bram required 2 level 5 zombies, which I do not run. So, this card actually makes it easier for me to play, because I do have a fair number of level 5s. Now, he doesn't have any effects if Dark Rebellion is not attached to him, but if Dark Rebellion is attached to him, it can detach a material, target a face-up monster your opponent controls, attack goes to 0, and it gains the attack of that monster. And during either player's turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, I can detach a material, negate it, and if I do, I can destroy that card, then special summon an Xyz monster from my graveyard. And that is the deck. Like I said before, there weren't a tremendous number of changes, but I had to do something about losing out on the extra copies of That Grass Looks Greener. And while Powerwall isn't exactly a fair substitute, it does enough for me to warrant using it in this deck. Other than that, not a tremendous number of changes, but I am starting to see more reliance on Prometheus than I initially thought, so I like to think this deck has enough variety of its own abilities and movesets that it can continue to win even with its loss on That Grass, and hopefully without the future edition of Left Arm Offering. I hope you guys like the deck profile, and if you can think of any way that I can improve this All Darkness deck, feel free to let me know. But in the meantime, this has been Nanashi, signing out.
What's the next stage? What's the next stage?